Our next Yager recipient is Ruggero Racca of District 18. Now those of you that don't know all of our districts know that District 18 is one of our larger districts that encompasses, well, all of Canada. So I just have to put that out there, that's a big challenge. So Racca's work as a teacher situates itself at the convergence of three pedagogical stances: interdisciplinary learning, transformative learning, and inquiry-based learning. The inquiry model Ruggero perfected in his classroom has been the focus of observation and broader implementation by the Toronto School Board, or District School Board, as well as the Ontario Ministry of Education. And so with that, Ruggero.
I suddenly realized how comfortable the chair was. First of all, thank you very much to NSTA for having me over, and thank you for the existence of this particular award. Thank you for the kinship that I'm experiencing with my fellow awardees. There's a lot of synergy there that hopefully will come out in my brief talk. Along with a thank to Dr. Yager, a big thank you to Dr. Bowman, who is pointing a camera at me. Stop it, Mike. I call him Big Mike. He's seen my three daughters growing up. I've had immense mentorship emerge from Dr. Bowman, and he's the one that put me up for this. And he's been tracking my growth as a teacher for the last years and years. And he's been always there in the wings, very supportive. Visited my classroom innumerable times, and absolutely put me out here. So that's the button I push. No, that's not the button I push.
One of the side.
One of the side ones. There we go. Interdisciplinary transformative inquiry. I realize in retrospect that my first handful of slides is absolutely way too filled with big words. So we're mostly going to burn through those. My email is at the bottom. All of the information is also uploaded to the Learning Center, so it's easily accessible. And I'm really not going to spend too much time other than hitting on the goals of why it is that I do what I do. The interconnectedness of subjects to me is really paramount. If kids get the idea that you're not just doing science in this room and you're doing math in that room, but there is an actual dialogue through it all, it's an immensely changing, shifting of their perception of learning. Student-driven learning. I'm a great believer in GER, that lovely gradual release of responsibility, and the ability for the students to really find their sea legs and move forward in their learning under their own steam. And fostering an ethic of care. This is really big, this is really critical, because we need our kids to understand the whole notion of we're borrowing time on this planet, we're not owning the planet, and we're borrowing against our kids. And that's a really critical thing for me as a dad, as an educator, to always keep in mind that we need to prepare that sense of fostering and that sense of stewardship with the planet, because we don't own it. Very quickly, why interdisciplinary? Because if the kids see how stuff fits together and fits around each other, the different subjects, it becomes a lot more pertinent, they become a lot more invested. What we're going to be talking about is a unit on biodiversity that also links with astronomy, links with geometry and data management, links with mapping and geography, and of course reflective writing, linking with language. GER, my biggest friend, allowing the kids greater and greater independence through the iterations of what we do, and that degree of choice that gives them the ability to become increasingly more and more invested. Ethic of care, I've already touched on that. What we do in this particular project, and Mike has seen a number of my projects over the years, is to explore the environment through the sensory modalities of other life forms. And some pretty magical stuff happens there. We started off with a very directed inquiry into how a different life form would perceive its environment. The life form that I picked is Euglena gracilis. It's a fantastic little protist that can be a benthic life form at the bottom of the pond, phagocytosing anything that it's yummy and it can phagocytose. But if it runs out of yummy things at the bottom, it can actually use a flagellum to drive itself towards the surface of the pond, which is determined through a photosensitive spot in the one-cell organism. And when it gets there, it can photosynthesize. So it's got the best of both being an animal critter and a plant critter. And it sees its environment only in terms of light intensity. So the first activity is based around the euglenator, which is a replicator of the life experience of a euglena. And it's made with a very hard to come by piece of technology known as the cardboard roll at the middle of your toilet roll and a piece of wax paper. Once you have one of those, it changes the way that you can map a classroom from how you see it with your eyes, which we did, and we did for both geography and math, because that ultimately is a net of a three-dimensional object that mimics our classroom. And they mapped with their eyes everything that they could see, translating it on a square meter to square meter perception. And then we said, okay, well, how would euglenas see it? And I got them all to build euglenators. And then they started looking around the classroom, and I said, well, the mapping exercise that we've just done, we're doing it again. And I thought I would have a riot in my hands, and instead I had complete buy-in, because it was like, oh my God, we're looking at it the way a different critter would see it. So as Euglena gracilis swam into our room, I had a group track the light intensity numerically, and then they started doing shading that sort of matched the numbers, and they kind of lost interest a little bit. I think it was a boys' group. Another group stuck it out and actually did a full-out grayscale of the light intensities in different spots in the classroom, again monitoring square meter by square meter. And finally, there was a bit of a what-if moment, and this was a girl group. They started going, well, what if different light intensities correlated with different colors? So they came up with the color version of the classroom, and they totally did that on their own. It was just one of those what-if moments. The beauty of this is that it starts calling into question, what if at some point a critter came along that saw different wavelengths in terms of different colors? And that whole building of a grayscale perception initially, which is basically an insect's eye, composite eye perception of the environment. It's black and white and mostly dictated by light intensity, to a color perception of an environment. So we had a lot of fun with that. Euglenators will pop up again with the astronomy part of the activity. We'll get there in a minute. But once I had them going on a technology that I pretty much spoon-fed to them, we started kicking up the second iteration of it, in which we started working with the anglerfish and the anglernator. An anglernator is a wearable device that limits your visual field to 30 centimeters, but imparts the human wearer with a proximity sensor at a 1 meter range, 180 degree sweep in front and to the sides of you. And we don't have that as humans. So they had to invent a gadget that you could wear that would allow you to do that and have that superhuman perception. And the feedback had to not be visual, because the sight is already taken up. So you had to use a different sense to give that sensory ability. So here's one example of anglernator. you will see that they snafu'd one of the hard hats that somehow came to live in my classroom, and they attached this sandwich of 2 layers of cardboard with little bits of black construction paper in between that limited visual field to 30 centimeters. However, the catfish, that is a stuffy of a cat on a stick, could actually go through and be seen in that visual limitation system. As far as the proximity sensor, they came up with the idea of using tinfoil, and this band on tinfoil would actually make a sound when catfish poked it. And that was a pretty cool way of doing it. One way that was also quite intriguing is the fact that a group decided to use a tactile feedback, taking a belt and poking straightened pieces of wire coat hanger. They created this device that would literally poke you in the belly if there was a catfish in the vicinity. So we had great fun with that bit, and in that one, I said, okay, let's all learn together about the anglerfish and its special powers, and then you guys figure out the wearable device. The third iteration, you pick your own critter. It can be an animal, it can be a plant. It has to have superhuman powers, and you have to devise, once you've researched what those powers are, you have to devise this wearable thing that gives the superpowers to humans. So this is where the fun began. Komodo dragon has the ability to see at a great distance very clearly. And I had a kid that was going to borrow mom's field glasses, and they were size, and mom is an avid bird watcher, and mom said no. And by then he'd already actually cut the little box with the slit to put the field glasses in, but he couldn't borrow them. So I said, okay, well, what do les jumelles, the binoculars look like? And he says, well, there's a front lens. And so I said, okay, well, I'll give you one of the magnifying lenses, and that can be the front lens. And what's at the other end? And he says, well, there's another lens. And so I said, okay, here's another magnifying lens, and figure out how we can make this work. And he actually came up with basically an optical bench taped to the box. And at that distance, the image from the first lens is magnified by the second lens and then perceived by the wearer of the box. And with that, he was able to create his own field glasses that he couldn't borrow from mom. And most of all, he was able to understand that although the image is upside down, it's actually magnified, and we've created this ability to see at a great distance. He also came up with the Jacobson's organ. The long tongue is retractable. If you look at the hand of the wearer, she can actually pull it back. And if you put a disc of filter paper impregnated with whatever vinegar, and then it's at the end of the tongue, you pull it back, it's under your nose, and you can then sense the chemicals in the air the way the Komodo would. The seal, fantastic sequence of reasoning. It has very good hearing, and they took coffee cups, cut off half of the coffee cup, made parabolic amplifiers that you could wear on your ears to increase your hearing. When the seal is diving, it loses its ability to see, hence the cover flap that comes down over the eyes, but it uses its vibrissae, the whiskers of the seal, very much the way that we saw with the proximity sensor in the anglernator. We now have thin wires going through a mask, poking the person in the face in order to replicate the ability to detect stuff underwater when it's really, really dark. Platypus about to dive. I'm very cruel to my kids. Those are not smiling children. That was a joke. Platypus about to dive has closed its eyes, hence the sleepy mask, closed its nose, hence the swimmer's clip, closed its ears, hence the earmuffs, lots of those in District 18. And it's about to go into very, very muddy water, and it's going to be able to detect its prey using bioelectrical fields. It can sense the electricity emanating from prey. And this was a girl group, and they were really, really stuck with it. And I said, okay, well, I need to unstick them. So I figured maybe they liked a 9-volt battery sometime in their childhood. And I said, okay, have you ever liked a 9-volt battery? And they go, yeah, no. And so I said, okay, wrong crowd. And I said, le monsieur, because I teach in French. Who has ever licked among the boys a 9-volt battery? And it's everybody's hands up. And so they decided, okay, we can construct little tiny circuits with a 9-volt battery holder at the distal end, a 9-volt battery holder inside the mask within licking strike of the wearer. And with 3 of those, we can decide if there's a prey to the left, in front of, to the right of the platypus. And that I thought was brilliant already. And then they went, well, what if it was a big prey or a little prey? What if we use a really, really new battery or a half-dead battery for a middle-sized prey or a nearly almost totally completely dead battery for the little prey? And they come up with a way of imparting to humans who don't have bioelectrical perception the ability to do that. Going back for a second to the euglenators are basically little tiny Kepler telescopes that you can wear in your classroom. And if you have a student for the university very patiently rotating a styrofoam ball around that star, which is basically a bare bowl, and you have the kids sitting around looking at the star through the euglenators, when you have the planet transiting in front of the star, the light intensity drops. And everybody has 5 fingers up except the kid in the very, very front who's got no fingers up. Because at that moment, he is with his euglenator not perceiving the light because there is the planet transiting in front of that distal star. And this is how Kepler finds exoplanets. And we had great fun with that. We tied it with math, we tied it with stewardship of the planet, because exoplanets are really, really cool, and some of them are Earth-like, but they're so freaking far away that we couldn't get there anyway. And this is sort of like the extensions that I find to be really the rich piece in what I do. With the exoplanet, you can get there on time. With the astronomy meets geography, we realize there is no up or down in space, but maps and globes have ups and downs. Geography meets society. The idea of upness is really critical. Like, we like to think of ourselves as being in the northern hemisphere, and we stick it on the upside of the maps. And you have to pretty much go all the way to California to actually find a map of the Earth where it's the other way around. And all the labels are written the right way around, but the Antarctica is at the top. And we talked about the Mercator map and how it's become used as a teaching tool, but the distortion in it, which was necessary for the navigational aspect of the map, where all of the parallel actually become parallel lines instead of being sort of concentric circles that become smaller and smaller and therefore are distorted if you squish them. That map distorts North America and Europe and makes them really, really big. But they're not that big. Canada is actually not as big as it looks like on a Mercator map. And it's become used as a teaching tool instead of a navigational tool. And the social consequences of that. And again, with the reflective writing, student meets the universe, there was a tangible trend in their learning journals about the fact that by not just learning about biodiversity, but by actually coming to appreciate just how incredibly cool and superhuman a lot of the non-human life forms are, there was a greater sense of wanting to take care of them, that ethic of care, that an invitation. I know that the folks in the front row, you're already totally doing this and killing it. I know that everybody in this room is already doing this, or else we wouldn't be here. But absolutely, if we can continue to highlight the interconnectedness between the subjects, empower the students to become their own driving force in learning, and to create that ethic of care, then we're going to possibly be okay on the planet. So please use that. Et c'est tout, c'est fini.
So once again, a plaque.
It's not every day that this happens to me.
Those are US dollars, by the way?
More important.